Hi, so my name is Professor Matt Freeman, so I'm the Centre Director here at FutureSpace.
And what was your role before joining FutureSpace?
So I joined FutureSpace 7-8 months ago, so I'm still relatively new into post. Previously, I was an academic, so I was a professor over at Baspar University in digital media and marketing and new technologies. So I went through the whole kind of academic career journey, really, from starting out as the hourly paid lecturer right the way through to professor. But during that time, I did a number of things that I think kind of interestingly sort of led to where I am now a little bit. So on the one hand, I became a research leader across the university, so someone very much kind of driving particular sort of strands of research for the university. And then secondly, I developed a spin-out company through the university that was sort of based and springing from some of the research and the grants that I had done. And it was really kind of during the latter experience in particular, but I think in many ways a lot of what I've done had sort of been leading to this, was just recognizing that universities, I think, are incredible places, and they're dynamic and they're exciting, and they're literally kind of whole worlds of knowledge, really, in terms of how I think about them. But there is one hell of a ceiling to those kind of worlds of knowledge, particularly around kind of the enterprise side and the commercial side and the business side. And as soon as I started to explore that kind of spin-out route of developing a kind of spin-out company through a university, it's almost like I couldn't look back a little bit anymore, and that became my passion and my kind of motivation and my drive, but not in a way that completely left behind the world of universities, because my company was about how do you market new creative technologies to new audiences, and the way that I did it was through the research that I was doing as an academic. So that company couldn't exist without my research background and me being an academic, and that relationship between the two in terms of how do you feed everything that's brilliant about universities into everything that's brilliant about kind of the commercial spin-out world, and how do you bring those together and cross that particular sea, became a passion of mine, and that is precisely what FutureSpace is about and is aiming to do. So that's why I'm here.
So what does the word innovation mean to you, if you could define it?
Yeah, I mean, innovation to me, I think for me, innovation is about collaboration. We've got a particular mantra that we're working to really sort of develop at FutureSpace, which is this idea of innovation as collaboration. And for me, innovation is all about embracing different ways of knowing, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing. It's absolutely about looking beyond the scope of what any one of us might know or have learned previously, or our assumptions about how something works. And it's about embracing completely different ways of doing, ways of thinking, different perspectives, different ideas. It's about doing research, it's about doing R&D, and it's about iteration and kind of that kind of striving for kind of constant improvement and constant development. And for me, that's where the collaboration comes in, by sort of embracing a kind of collaborative model to innovation. What we're doing is we're opening up new ways of thinking. It's almost a little bit like the cliche, isn't it, of traveling broadens the mind. If you stay in your hometown, not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but an assumption might be if you do that, you might be limiting how you see the world and actually what the world is and actually what's possible in terms of stepping outside of that and exploring different cultures and different peoples and different religions and different politics and just simply different countries. It very much opens your eyes to new ways of doing. And for me, innovation it's exactly the same. You can innovate within a bubble, or you can choose to break through that bubble and embrace different perspectives, different technologies, different processes. And through doing that, you can't help but be pushing forward what that innovation might be in all kinds of trailblazing ways.
So how important is it to have a diverse range of tenants and disciplines and people here?
Yeah, so I mean, FutureSpace has a real kind of mix. When we do have a fairly kind of defined gateway policy in terms of who's here. So partly that's to do with kind of vision and approach, but a lot of it is actually just to do with the sectors that they work in. So, all of our companies are broadly high tech, and then we have sort of sub-sectors underneath that. around engineering and health tech and digital tech, etc. But what's nice is we've got a nice mix of businesses in terms of stage as well. So everyone that joins us has reached a certain level. You know, they tend to have had prior investments or grants, for example. But actually, in terms of size, they could be one person, they could be 30 people, they could be anything in between. And of course, the journey of being at Future Space is precisely getting them from that one person stage to a 30-person stage and beyond, so that they don't really need Future Space anymore, and they kind of graduate, as it were. And what we really try and do is try and facilitate any opportunities we can to sort of bring those businesses or those entrepreneurs together who have that kind of different level of experience, whether it's just a workshop or event, or even kind of a social or a beer and pizza, but actually bringing those kind of different people together. So actually some of that knowledge can be shared and kind of disseminated, around the community.
So how do you support those businesses and develop the ecosystem beyond, providing the rooms?
Absolutely. So we in terms of support, we think of it as we have three strands in terms of support. The first one, as you mentioned there, is space. So a company would take residency with us, whether it's an office or a lab or a workshop, and then that becomes their home for their company. But of course, that's the beginning, and ultimately, all, as I see it, all that kind of space actually offers is just the entryway in to then everything else. So the everything else is two other strands. So we offer a business support strand. So this takes the form of one-to-one business support. So we have an innovation team based with us full time with various kind of expertise that can support businesses. We have a whole network of what we call our advisory space. So a whole network of business experts covering everything from legal to marketing to investment to recruitment, etc. That all of our companies can access and plug into at different times depending on their needs. But also we offer kind of various tools, so our businesses can access things like Growth Mapper, so they can kind of run diagnostics of their businesses and their needs at different points. And then another sort of subset of it is around things like marketing. So we can offer things like marketing support to our companies. We offer a whole suite of workshops and roundtables and breakfast events that are led by our advisors to really sort of facilitate and support around those kind of day-to-day sort of business challenges, really. The third strand of this is then our R&D support, our research and development support. So whereas the business support that we offer tends to be led through Oxford Innovation, so Future Space is managed through Oxford Innovation, which is a kind of a big UK-wide network of business and innovation centres. So OI currently manage 32 centres across the UK. Future Space is one of those. And business support is absolutely at the heart of what Oxford Innovation does. So a lot of our business support tends to be channeled or facilitated through OI. And what that means is that the advice or the support that is given isn't just local in terms of our team or even local advisors in the ecosystem. It also means that businesses can tap in on a kind of national level to different advisors, also part of the Oxford Innovation Network. Then the third part, as I mentioned, is R&D. So this is really about university collaboration. So we've been trying for a while really to sort of think of a mechanism that would allow our businesses to engage with the university, to go into the university, to collaborate with the university in a way that very, very clearly and plainly is in line with what our businesses actually need and what they actually want. And for me, the concept of R&D is almost the bridge between those particular worlds. Conducting research is of course what universities do, and R&D is exactly what a tech business like those at Future Space will absolutely need. So the way that it kind of operates is our businesses can go into particular schools or particular academic departments that match our business's needs. So particularly like School of Engineering, School of Applied Sciences. They've of course got a whole range of expertise through their academics. They've got a whole range of facilities and equipment, and of course they've got students. So what we've tried to do is think about how our businesses can engage with all of those three things in a kind of structured way. So it starts with what we call student consultancy projects. So for companies that are maybe quite early stage, looking to sort of dip their toe into sort of collaborative R&D with the university, what we can do is we can essentially get our businesses working on a brief and say, okay, what is it that you actually need to drive your R&D at this particular point? We offer that brief to the school at the university, and it gets pinned to a particular kind of postgraduate program, whether it's an MRes or a dissertation or a PhD, something like that, where then the student is recruited to actually then lead on that particular project. So it might be a 3-month project, it could be a 6-month project, it could even be a 12-month project in some cases. And then what that means is that the students can then also access the academics, who then become supervisors on that project. So it's a way of bringing the business and the academic together. But it also means that the students can access any of the facilities or equipment that's available within that particular school. So almost by proxy, the business is accessing those particular facilities as well. So from the company's point of view, those sorts of projects are free, but actually from the university's point of view, it means it's giving students, all kind of employability experience, and it's bringing those academics and those businesses together as well. But then we can also facilitate more paid for support as well. So, if our companies are looking to access certain facilities at certain times to do things like prototyping or trial and testing, for example, we've now got mechanisms in place so our companies can kind of go in through that route as well. And then the furthest possible end of this is we then are kind of actively kind of working with our companies and the university in terms of shared grants and bids as well. So, one example of that is something like a knowledge transfer partnership. But there's all kinds of sort of grants that our businesses are going for now with academics, really to sort of scale that kind of collaborative R&D from that sort of early stage to the mid stage to the later stage. And of course, through all of that, what we tend to see is a whole bunch of students interacting with our companies. We then see students being hired as interns, and then ultimately we see students being hired as employees kind of longer term. So it becomes a sort of almost like a talent pipeline from the company's point of view, and it becomes a really sort of fantastic vehicle to support the university students as well. The history really of Future Space is, so we've been operating for around 8 years now, and it started through central government support. So we are one of 4 university enterprise zones that were originally set up. I think it was back in 2014, 2015, and the mission there was in terms of driving kind of collaboration and enterprise between business and academia, and ever since then we've kind of been on this kind of mission towards that. But yeah, absolutely. So the space, the building is part of the university. We are literally on the campus at Frenchay campus, and Oxford Innovation, who, as I mentioned, are really kind of the leading specialists in terms of innovation centres, are then employed to manage the space on behalf of the university.
What would you say to the gap between business and academia? When I interviewed Paul Watson from the National Innovation Centre for Data in Newcastle, he said they don't speak the same language. The timescale for businesses is we need some results 9 to 12, whilst for academia it's like 3 years. There's also some risk in research, because that's the whole point of research, while business want a bit more certainty. So how do you help bridge that gap? Because you talked about smaller projects and larger projects, but what would you say to bridging that gap between business and academia?
Honestly, I think it's perhaps the biggest challenge in this particular space. Absolutely, there is a different language, and the timescales is incredibly different. For me, I think where we sort of try to bridge this as best we can is you can't ignore those differences. Like the timescale thing is what it is. Where I think we have sort of made a little bit of progress is around language, actually, because as someone that's worked in universities and then worked outside of them as well, what I find really, really interesting is that by and large, the companies we've got here and the academics here at the university, they're all interested in the same things. They're all really, as long as they're working in the same discipline, they're all interested in the same things. They've all got the same questions. They've all got the same challenges. They're all, talking to very similar people, and they might not be reading the same work necessarily, but actually what the ideas within that work is quite often very, very similar. So it is a language thing that's at the heart of that. And what I've tried to do is, what we've tried to do as a team is really think about how do we kind of package our support in a way that speaks the languages of what businesses need. So I mentioned there's a second, it's a really good example. Even things like R&D is a good example. That's not a university term, it's a business term. But the principle of R&D is about doing research in order to find answers to something, in order to implement something. And that is exactly what academia is trying to do. It's exactly the same processes. So this is what I mean. The processes are often very, very similar. It's just the way we talk about them tends to be different. So we kind of package support in a way that speaks the language of businesses, but is absolutely in line with what universities are doing. A more kind of precise example as well is, on a strategic level, what we've tried to do is put in place almost like a kind of a new vision statement for what Future Space is, that is essentially a one-pager that speaks the language of both sides. So when a business comes in, we now tell that business very, very openly that actually what we are an innovation centre that is based on the university's campus. And what that means is, yes, first and foremost, we are trying to drive three things: collaboration, innovation, and growth for your company. But through doing those three things, we are also feeding three priorities for the university, which are income generation, graduate outcomes, and knowledge exchange. So they're three very different things across those two worlds, but actually fundamentally they kind of join together. And then what we've sort of put in place is a kind of new set of metrics and things like KPIs and targets, where actually we can say we are doing a whole bunch of products and services. So all of our R&D offerings, our business support offerings, our internships that we offer, our advisor support, all of these things that we offer to our companies, we can point at and say, well, the impact from doing that thing actually goes like that. There is an impact for the university, which might be around income or knowledge exchange or supporting students around employability. But at the same time, not in any way as a separate thing, but simultaneously, that is also supporting your business in terms of its innovation, its growth, and its collaboration. And actually having that kind of shared ethos that we kind of just say openly, whether it's to the university or to businesses or to the ecosystem, I think really helps in terms of, first and foremost, allowing everyone to understand what we do and how we operate, but it also helps in terms of expectations. So when businesses join us, there's no sense of actually what's the university's role in this, and actually how do I engage? Do I even want to? Do I need to engage with the university? Actually, no. It's now what we say is, if you're part of the Future Space community, yes, we want you to be a trailblazing high-tech business, and we're going to do everything that we can to support that particular growth for you. But through doing that, we're also going to be driving some of the key needs for the university, because, as I say, ultimately, when you break them down, they're actually very, very overlapping. The thing that differs is the language. As for the timescales thing, I mean, that is a kind of real challenge. The way that we've kind of gone about doing this is by, if it's something like student projects, for example, actually recognizing that not all student projects start in September. And actually, if you are strategic enough about it, so let's say if you want, or a company wants marketing support through the business school, for example, well, the business school has around 500 students, and there's a whole bunch of programs, fantastic programs and fantastic modules, all doing marketing of different kinds that are taking place at different times as well. Some of them are like 3-week sprints, some of them are 12-month-long research projects, and then some of them are in between. Some of them are starting September, some of them are June, some of them are February. So actually what we've tried to do is partner with certain kind of academics and certain programs across the universities, where actually we can map this out and go, well, this is starting in June, this is in February, this is in March, whatever it might be. So actually when we then talk to businesses, that expectation is there. We can't say you can do this tomorrow, because it's not realistic. So there is that kind of sense of managing expectations, but equally we can say, well, actually the next cohort start time for this is in a month's time, or is in 5 weeks, or in 6 weeks' time. And actually that suddenly means that it becomes kind of much more achievable for our businesses in terms of their kind of more immediate timescales as well.
So once you've bridged that gap between business and academia, and there's work that flows out from research, what happens to the intellectual property? Because that sometimes is a very big sticking point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question of IP, it varies a lot for us depending on the scale of the project. So, if it's a kind of large scale multi-million pound, Innovate UK grant or a KTP or something like that, obviously this is kind of something that's baked into the contract essentially from the very beginning, or even before the bid is actually submitted, in terms of the IP arrangements and who would own and who would benefit. Usually at that level there tends to be a profit sharing or an IP sharing kind of arrangement that kind of goes on, but that doesn't, in my experience, tend to be a huge kind of issue as long as that's kind of worked through. The stuff that's a little bit sort of lower level, what I find is that actually it's only a problem if you don't think about that stuff. And actually, what we do with our companies is we have those documents and we have those kind of agreements in place for something as simple as a student project to something higher end or something in between, making it clear actually how this kind of works. From the university's perspective, if it is something like student projects, like 9 times out of 10, they'll say it's the companies, because actually that's not really what they're doing it for. Their kind of motive behind it is not about the potential IP or the potential commercial gain. What they're up for is around kind of student employability and kind of opening those opportunities up for their student body, really. So more often than not, it's a case of just writing that down and having those kind of agreements in place, really. But absolutely, there's if that stuff's not in place, I think that's when it becomes tricky.
Are there any funded projects that they approach FutureSpace to say, whether it's a university or commercial organisations or government agencies, that said, we've got this problem, we know you, the people around this innovation centre, have the skills, can you please help us research this or farm it out to a innovation team? Does that kind of thing happen, where funded projects come to you and you get a chance to...
So not as much as we would like. I think that's, to be honest, I think that's very much a next step for us in terms of it working in that particular direction. Where that does happen is if there is, if sometimes, there's instances where there's a particular, research orientated bid that's kind of going on, and the university might be looking for a business partner to feed into the application as sort of part of the sort of impact kind of pathways and those sorts of things. So in that case, we might try and match-make particular businesses to feed in. Where we do more of it is actually the other way around, believe it or not. So it's actually kind of company-led rather than academic-led. So our company is kind of coming to us as a team and saying, I'm looking to do X, I need this. My R&D is looking to do this, I'm looking to explore a bid in this particular area. And we will then try and facilitate those kind of relationships and those sorts of opportunities, which then might scale into, let's say, like an Innovate UK grant or those sorts of things. But it's one of these things that I think, as FutureSpace becomes more known for what it does and the type of businesses that's coming out of it and the type of R&D that's coming out of it, the types of collaborations that we're trying to implement, the more that we have a kind of almost a portfolio of those sorts of activities, and the more that we can share those activities, I think what you're talking about will start to happen a little bit more.
Are there any success stories of from recent members and projects that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, actually, this morning I was having a catch up with one of our businesses, a great example of this. So the company's called MPK Recovery, that joined FutureSpace not even very long ago, perhaps a year or 2 years ago, and their kind of whole business, they're one of our applied sciences business, and what they're doing is fascinating. They're turning human urine into fertilizer, and it's an incredible proposition. And they work with all sorts of partners around Glastonbury Festival and all sorts of people. And they're one of our companies that are absolutely squarely kind of focused on the value of what UWE can bring in order to make that happen. So there's been all sorts of stuff that they've done in terms of having kind of facilities put across the campus as part of their testing. But what they've done literally over the past sort of 6 months is they've gone and engaged with a whole bunch of sort of student projects, and they really thought about it quite strategically, because they thought, well, there's no reason why we can't engage a whole bunch of students. They get a whole bunch of students doing a bunch of different things for us, on the recognition that actually some of that might prove to be really useful for us, some of it might not, but actually what it does is it kind of almost opens up that opportunity for the company, and this is what happened, for them to actually identify particular students. They go, actually, you were fantastic, you really, really impressed us, you helped us understand something in a way we hadn't thought about it, and through that's kind of led to us saying, okay, well, you know what, we can now facilitate an internship, which we kind of pay for through the university. So then there was a particular student that kind of became an intern, and I found out this morning that particular intern has now been employed longer term on a permanent contract, having literally just graduated only a few weeks ago. And there's lots of instances in NPK recovery of that, where they are really kind of just going into UWE and making these connections with different kind of academics, and then that's led to kind of £500,000 grants that have kind of come off the back of it, that have gone through the university as with them as a partner. Or, as I mentioned, it's about just really kind of embracing all of the kind of the student talent that's over there, getting involved in a whole bunch of different projects, using that as a springboard to identify their interns, and then in turn identify their employees. So now there's a whole bunch of people within that team. I think they've added. I think they've grown by 9 people, if I remember rightly, over the past 12 months, and a whole bunch of those people are from the university. They are either ex-students or they're actually academics that are kind of working part-time on particular projects within the company as well. So when it works, it really, really works, and I think that's the exciting stuff when you see that happen.
If you were to reach out to the camera, and what kind of people should be coming to Future Space, coming to speak to you, and do you have open events for the public to come and gain some insight as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So broadly speaking, so we are looking for high tech, high growth businesses. We have a particular kind of gateway sort of policy. So within that kind of, we're looking for companies that might sit under the umbrella of things like advanced engineering, health and life science, digital technology, or green technology. Creative technology is a sort of emerging kind of strand for us as well, really. So any company that is working within this particular high tech, high growth space, absolutely we're keen to hear from. But really, beyond that, what we're looking for are companies that kind of share our particular ethos or our kind of our mission, really. So we're not an innovation centre that's just based on space. So we don't want our companies kind of coming into us and going into their office and closing their office door for the next 6 to 12 months. That's not what we're about. What we're about is collaboration. So we're looking for companies that are really quite ambitious, that are trying to trailblaze, that might have a sort of tech for good ethos, for example, but really can see the value of the university, as well as all of our kind of advisors and our business support through Oxford Innovation that I mentioned, as the ticket really to that particular growth. So companies that want to come out of their office and engage in our events and our workshops, but companies that also want to work with students and academics and kind of constantly working on their R&D in order to trailblaze and to push forward, really. And in terms of getting involved, absolutely. So we run a number of monthly events. So we run a breakfast event that's called Innovate Together, where all of our businesses and academics and ecosystem partners come together. So these are on the first Wednesday of the month, and we open this up through Eventbrite. So all of our tickets are free via Eventbrite. We also have a monthly beer and pizza social, which is the third Thursday of the month at 4:00, and that's a much more kind of informal affair, where again all of our kind of businesses sort of come together in a more sort of social way, but that is opened up externally as well. And it's a great opportunity just to see the space and to learn a little bit more what we're about. But otherwise, absolutely, we're always kind of interested to hear from new businesses and to get people in, have a little look around and see our space.
If innovation is about collaboration, how do you collaborate with other innovation spaces around the UK to understand what kind of tenants are there who could cross-fertilise with tenants here?
Yeah, so we have a good relationship with kind of other spaces, particularly across Bristol, that kind of share a similar remit to us. So places like Science Creates in the centre of Bristol, for example, that are kind of slightly more deep tech than us, but broadly speaking, kind of overlap in terms of what we do. So we have it's not anything formal by any means, but we have kind of very sort of good informal relationships with the different sort of centres in the region, and we kind of get together and we talk, kind of fairly frequently. And there's been a good number of instances actually where we've come together and we've spoken about a particular business that either might be struggling for whatever reason, they've just lost investment, and there might be kind of shared support that we might be able to offer, or more frequently, it's kind of the different centres sort of saying, actually this company is fantastic, but actually they're not quite right for us. You know, we've all got different mantras and different priorities. If we're linked to councils or we're linked to universities, we've got different agendas there. So even though we may look from the outside in as tech innovation, actually what that means and how it looks is very, very different. And actually finding the right home for a business is far more important than just accepting them. So there's been plenty of instances where we've gone, actually, you know what, this company, it's not quite working here, it's not quite a fit, but actually would be a perfect fit for you guys over there, and actually sort of made that kind of introduction as well.
So apart from the university, is the local government and central government and UK agencies, are they partners that you work with as well and get support from?
Not formally. I mean, we work with places like Bristol and Bath and Invest, these sorts of people, on a kind of slightly larger ecosystem basis. But really kind of where that sort of level of support comes in is through funding, essentially. So, you know, as you can imagine, most of our companies are actively putting in grants on a regular basis, some of them with the university, some of them independently, but they're all actively putting in grants at the kind of central kind of government level. So that's, I think, really kind of at the moment where that sort of feeds in for us.
If somebody signs up as a member, what can they expect on the day of getting the keys? What's their kind of journey like with you?
Yeah, so when they join us, they would either take residency in, as I mentioned, in an office or a lab or a workshop, depending on what their business might be. It would be a varying size depending on what they need and how big their team might actually be. And we then have kind of two very sort of different sides to the support that we offer. We have a fantastic centre manager and assistant centre manager that kind of take care of the whole operational side of the centre. So anything that's to do with, you know, everything from Wi-Fi to phone lines to wanting to put up blackboards, for example, or whiteboards or facilities or whatever it might be within their particular office space, and facilitating those kinds of requests. So the commercial side and renewals, etc., etc. To then on the more sort of business support or university kind of led support as well, and we have a whole sort of separate team. So as the company kind of joins us, they have this kind of, you know, we think fairly kind of robust induction process. And one of the first things they do is they sit down with our innovation team, and we sort of talk them through actually where are they as a company. We kind of do diagnostics in terms of what their needs are and what their challenges might be, and then use that as a little bit of a springboard to identify what the needs are and the objectives are. And we sort of do this on a sort of 6th monthly basis. So we sit down with the company, what are the needs, what are the activities that we can try and support and facilitate with, and then we kind of work towards that and support the company through that over the next 6 months. And then we come back round, we review, and then we kind of go back round again. And then obviously alongside that, our companies are coming along to weekly workshops or seminars or socials. They're working with our centre manager and the team on that side around the logistics or the operational side of the centre as well.
Thank you, Matt. Is there anything else you would like to add?
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.